Meanwhile, on the comic box. Comics. Thank you for that. Hey everyone, and welcome to the... Alright. Move the table. Go on, go lay down. Good dog. Welcome to the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I am Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek. I am joined this week by Dr. Ray. Once again, hi Ray.
Thank you for that illustrious introduction. I am happy to be here.
Wonderful. And we're also joined by the dogs that my wife and I are watching for my in-laws. So I'm sure they'll be panting and sniffing, and they'll come hit the table where the microphone is sitting. And
so my panting and sniffing is going to be edited out, but the dogs is going to be kept in for your pleasure.
Exactly. So this episode is our Wonder Woman review. We both just saw the movie, though not at the same theater or at the same time, but a half hour apart from one another, or 45 minutes apart from one another. And we have not spoken about the movie at all.
No.
So we are going to get to that in just a second. But first, since it's been a while, I think the last time you were on was our Doctor Strange review.
Yep, that is correct.
So
and Liam and me went to see Doctor Strange, and we reviewed it here on the podcast.
Right. So we'll call it an extended weekly geekery. But how's it been going? What have you been up to?
Not a whole lot. I don't know if this qualifies as geekery, but I have started the new Twin Peaks revival.
Totally geek. How is it?
That's more film geek, not so much comic geek, but I enjoy it. It's very David Lynch. Okay. It's very much, if you enjoy his films or TV, it's a perfect slide into that world of weirdness, and you can't tell if it's a genius or a failed art student.
I was going to say, like what level of David Lynch? Is it, because I never saw the original Twin Peaks, but I've seen like Videodrome, and is it like that level of weird?
At times, it is very bizarre, but it's also very atmospheric. Mm-hmm. He has some of the best production design, like just the world building he does is great, and the sound is phenomenal. Not necessarily the score, which is familiar, but just like the wind blowing outside a cabin where two people are having a conversation, or footsteps outside the door. He does stuff like that very well.
That's really interesting. Okay, because I keep seeing ads for it on Hulu, and I know I've never seen the original, which I think is on Netflix.
I believe so. It has to at least be on Amazon. But yeah, I have seen the original. I enjoyed it.
Okay. How long is it? Is it like, would it? Because my big thing is I never got into it because I didn't know if it was going to be this huge time investment.
2 seasons.
Oh, that's not bad.
So the second season is several episodes longer. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like, less than 10 and then 20.
Okay. But all right.
It's not too bad.
Now, were you a huge fan of the original, or did you just kind of like it?
No, I enjoyed it. Again, it was weird, but it also has that campy melodrama to it. So it's this weird mashup of elements that I enjoyed. I was roommates with someone who had the DVD. Mm-hmm. That was his favorite show, maybe his favorite thing in the visual medium.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so he hyped it up for me and provided me with the chance to watch it in its entirety, and I really enjoyed it.
So far, how are you liking the new one? You said it's very Lynch, but...
Yeah, it's very weird, very Lynch, but again, there are certain aspects of it I appreciate, even when it gets too bizarre for me to, find a tether to hold on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, what else have you been up to? What have you been reading?
I went to the comic book store last weekend. Mm-hmm. I got really into Hawkeye when it was Matt Fraction did a run a few years ago.
Yeah,
and absolutely. I got really into that, and I've kind of held on to the Hawkeye franchise since then.
So who's writing it right now? Because now isn't the book...
I think it's centered on Kate Bishop, the younger female Hawkeye.
Yeah.
I believe it's Jill Thompson is writing it.
Okay.
And just because that most recent run of the male Hawkeye was so fantastic, I've been keeping up with the title, and she's doing a great job.
Okay. I considered continuing. I dropped out when that volume ended. But like one of the, I think they put out 4 trades or something, and one of the trades is solely Kate Bishop.
Yep.
Like that's all they're talking about.
She's a major character in his run.
Right. Yeah. But no, like one of them is just literally, it was like LA Woman or something. Like the whole storyline is just about her out in LA, and then it comes back where they end up meeting back together. And I really like that. I thought that served the book. Well, that's cool. Because I know you read a whole bunch of stuff too.
Yep.
That's out there.
I was listening. You brought up on the last podcast that I was reading Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
There was a minor character in that run, great character, named Dr. Afra.
Mm-hmm.
Female bounty hunter type. She's actually an archaeologist, but also tortures people.
Sure, yeah.
And does bounty hunting on the side.
Well, that's all part of archaeology.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's standard these days.
Yeah, it's standard procedure.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I've been reading Dr. Afra because she got her own spin-off series. She was such a standout character in that Darth Vader comic that she got her own series. I compare her to Boba Fett in the original Star Wars movies.
Okay.
In that he, just shows up, has very few lines, just kind of this background character, but proved so popular and cool with fans that just his look kind of inspired this whole spin-off, this culture into Boba Fett. And she's the same thing, where there's this main storyline and she's just kind of a side character, but clearly she has her own story.
Well, cool. I dig that. Okay. As far as my own weekly geekery, I've actually been gone the last several episodes of my podcast. I wasn't around. Those were all pre-recorded. So I just got back from a week and a half in Northern Ireland and Scotland, which the wife and I nicknamed Honeymoon 2.0 because it was for our 5th anniversary. We went back to the spot in Northern Ireland where we got married and then saw like the Giant's Causeway, a couple of the places that we talked about going to that we didn't have time to. And then we went over to Scotland with not a whole lot of game plan outside of where we were going to stay. But we got to go and see the Highland Games. So it was very cool to see that in Scotland, to see the guys throwing the, tree trunks. I might post a couple of pictures on Twitter just because I know that I don't, my Facebook page isn't public or anything like that. So I might put a couple pictures up on Twitter. I did make sure to stop by comic book stores while I was out there. And I
was going to say, you were LARPing.
And
playing tabletop role-playing games.
No, I didn't get super nerdy while I didn't even get to read. I brought like some comics along to read, but it was so much like just driving and hiking and then going to find a place to eat dinner every day. There wasn't time really for any geekery that way. I did watch Kubo and the Two Strings.
Great movie.
Really good movie.
Oh, so
I was
amazing.
Surprised at how much I enjoyed it.
I was mad at the Academy Awards for that them. Didn't win Best Animated Feature. I was rooting for that. Or at least Moana.
Right.
But
no, it was
Zootopia. Lame. Thumbs down.
Yeah.
I like Zootopia, but
it was
man.
Yeah, it was good, but I understand Zootopia had more of a culture around it, I think, than Kubo and the Two Strings did.
True.
But I got to see that, but beyond that, I didn't get to read a ton, but I went and found an indie comic shop in Belfast called Comic Book Guys. And it's these two guys who really like branded themselves as part of the whole thing. So they had like custom pop vinyl figures of themselves. They have a comic book that's all about them, like fighting demons or something like that. And they're big Supernatural fans, so they had original Supernatural artwork just for their store and that sort of thing. And then in Edinburgh, there's only 2 comic shops that I found. And one is a Forbidden Planet, which a lot of comic fans in the UK don't like because it's this massive chain. So they feel like it's sort of the big box store version. It's the Walmart version of comic book stores. And then there's this little tiny place called Deadhead Comics that was really cool. There's a store dog that was just sitting outside the store and then came in to get pet and then went back outside. The owner, I had a very thick accent and may or may not have been high or drunk. I can't say because I don't know, because when you have
it's family-friendly podcast.
But no, just because of a thick accent. And a super tiny store. It might be one of the smallest comic stores I'd ever been in. But they had a couple self-published comics, so I picked some of those up. I haven't read them yet. And from the Belfast store, I picked up my first Madman comic. I had never read Madman before, and I knew people really enjoyed it. So I picked up this like 60-page spectacular whatever thing, and sort of introduced me to the character of Madman. And so I'll be.
I
be
thought
curious
you were
to read
saying
more.
Mad Men. I'm like, that's a great show. There's a comic.
Yeah, no, but Madman. So
Yeah.
if you've ever seen it, it's a guy who is dressed all in white, and he has a red sort of lightning bolt, but it ends right with the dot, so it's like an exclamation point.
Yeah.
Is that right? Am I thinking that right?
Now that you describe the character's look, he's coming back to me.
Yeah. So I'd always heard, great things about It was one of those comics in like the 90s that was huge.
Yeah.
And it's written and drawn by Mike Allred, who is the artist. He was the artist on like X-Statix when X-Force came back and had the character of like Dupe, and is the current artist on The Silver Surfer, which may or may not be ending, actually. I'm not sure. But I'm not going to talk about that.
But I've heard great things about the current run of The Silver Surfer.
It's absolutely fantastic. And a lot of that is due to this guy's art. It's very pop art.
Yeah.
But that's all I can really say. And that's my weekly geekery for the last,
I would just like to throw something out there.
Yeah.
The comic book store you went to was called in Belfast?
In Belfast, it was just called the Comic Book Guys.
That's how you can tell a great / old comic book store. They have very unoriginal names.
That's true.
Like the oldest comic book store in Minnesota just closed. Comic Book College was its name because it was located on the U of M campus or adjacent to it.
Right.
And I went to, when I vacationed out in California, Big Red Comics. I was like, didn't the gum people like have a trademark on that name?
You would think.
No, they're just so old. They predate the gum.
Or the other sort of Minnesota, at least. I don't know if they're outside of Minnesota, but there was Hot Comics and Collectibles, and that was it.
Yeah.
The comic store I used to go to, which also is now long closed. It closed back when I was in like high school, was called New Millennium Comics.
Ooh.
Because it opened in I want to say it used to be a different name, and I can't remember what it was. And then they merged. Old Millennium. And then they merged with another comic shop, became New Millennium. But yeah, that's why it's important to get out there and support comic shops, especially the ones with the unoriginal names.
Yes.
But it was a good trip, and so I got a little nerdery out of it. I don't have the comics with me that I picked up in Edinburgh, otherwise I'd tell you what they are. One is about like alien abductions or something. They didn't exactly look like comics that were up my alley, but I love just picking up something new, especially in a little small local shop.
Yeah, me too.
I have a whole lot of fun with that. So that is it for our weekly geekery. We're not going to get into any of the big news or reviews. We'll save that for next week. We'll do a big news and review episode. So we will get into our Wonder Woman review, but first, this.
I'm Void.
And I'm Beej.
And together, we're the Geek to Geek podcast. Well, we make it. It is kind of us, but I guess it's separate.
Every week, we pick a topic from geek or digital culture and chat about it for a while.
And you're invited. We talk about books and movies, games, comics, the internet.
Or really whatever we feel like.
Yeah, that too.
So look for the Geek to Geek podcast on iTunes.
Or wherever your podcasts are sold. Or downloaded. Or whatever.
Yeah. And then we are back.
All right. Welcome back.
Welcome back. That was a commercial for the Geek to Geek Podcast Network, which we are a part of. I say this every single week, so I'll just throw this out there again. Star ratings and reviews on iTunes are awesome. We don't spend any money to advertise any of the shows on this network, so any help that you guys can throw our way is awesome. We did have some new reviews. I'll say new-ish reviews. We were previously having a challenge to try and get up to 20 reviews, and we did manage to get up to 17. And I know at least one of the people reviewing is going to be disappointed because he said the first thing he wanted to hear when we did that bonus episode was me dropping the F-bomb, which is funny because I'm not like a filthy mouthed person outside of this podcast, but it's just that thinking of the people that listen to this podcast that have never met me before only know me through this podcast. So they have no idea if I'm the kind of person that swears or not or anything like that. And that was one of the things we were going to do. It was we were going to let everybody pick the worst show or movie, whatever, comic related, and then Liam and I, or we were going to invite you to join us, obviously. We're going to drink and watch and do a commentary track on it. And we were going to, pull off the shackles of clean speaking, and we were going to allow ourselves to have an adult podcast where we could swear
very
and stuff.
blue podcast.
Very blue. And that still might happen in the future, because I know we keep talking. We were at a comic convention, was it last year or even the year before?
Maybe.
Where we picked up the Roger Corman Fantastic Four bootleg. And have you watched it since we got it? You're still waiting? We were all going to get together and watch it, and then I wanted to record a podcast of it. So that might...
Still, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure if it has subtitles, so it might be hard
to do a review.
Yeah.
Yeah,
commentary. A review we could do.
That's true.
A commentary might be difficult.
Well, the risk obviously is hearing the audio and getting sued for it. But the movie was never released. So
exactly.
I don't know who's going to pick up and be like, hey, wait a minute, you can't... Maybe we'll figure it out. We'll use headphone splitters or something, and we'll all listen on headphones. I just
want to throw that out there. Yeah. So Fox's attorneys are prepared.
We're doing good.
Inevitable lawsuit.
All right, so star ratings and reviews are always super helpful. But let's get into Wonder Woman. So the way I want to handle this review is the way we've done it in the past, is we'll do some non-spoilery stuff first.
All right.
And just get out general thoughts without getting into detail. And then we'll dig into just sort of the plot itself. The big things, what we think.
Still no spoilers.
No, at that point we can do spoilers.
Okay.
So we'll do a very brief non-spoiler, then we'll get into spoiler territory. We'll talk the plot. We'll talk a little bit about the individual characters or anything specific that stood out to us. And then we'll just close it out with sort of, after we've had our conversation, if, we have any difference of opinions or that sort of thing. Just
thumbs
sort of
up,
closing.
thumbs down.
Yeah. But let's start with the non-spoilery review. So without details, what did you think of Wonder Woman?
I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend it. I think all of your listeners should go out and see it. Give it a chance. I am obviously a big fan of the character.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, you're wearing your wonderful what does it say? Fight like a girl. And it's a t-shirt featuring Wonder Woman. She's all cut up and bloody knuckles and black eyes and
still fighting.
But still fighting. I like that. That's a good shirt.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I would recommend this movie. Even if you're not a Wonder Woman fan, it's still enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, non-spoiler things I can say. Oh, the score is very underrated. I really enjoyed the score of this movie.
Okay.
Which isn't used heavily, but, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fine film, and yeah, I would recommend it, fan or not of Wonder Woman.
I think I'm going to agree. I really liked it as well. I know there's people out there saying that, like on Rotten Tomatoes, it had the highest, original rating or whatever you want to call it, right when it came out, initial rating, than any of the other Marvel or DC movies. Or some people are, wondering if it's better than all of the others. I don't know if I would give it that high of praise.
Yeah.
But I will say it is leaps and bounds better than Batman v Superman. It takes the stuff that you sort of liked in that movie of Wonder Woman and certainly expands on it. It does have the action in there and the comedy, and it also has quieter moments in it, which were so important to have. It doesn't feel the way Batman v Superman did, where it's just go, 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 go the whole time. And I really appreciated that. So I really enjoyed it as well. And I would still say, yeah, go out and see it. And if you don't know if you're a Wonder Woman fan, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Because I thought it pulled from a lot of different source material. There's a couple things we can talk about in Easter eggs that are a little more specifically pulled. But in general, I thought their take on Wonder Woman is very sort of well-rounded. And so in that sense, I would say you'll get a decent sense of who the character is. They don't go really strong in the peaceful ambassador, or really strong in just the warrior, or just a straight up female version of Superman. It's none of those things, and it's sort of all of them together. So,
yeah.
Non-spoiler review. I also really liked this movie. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I went in with zero expectations. I was hoping it was going to be good just for the franchise, or rather the DC EU or whatever they're calling it, for female-led superhero movies in general. I was hoping it was going to be good, but I didn't have a strong expectation for the movie because I was going in pretty blind, and I came out satisfied. So, yay, go see it.
Well, it's ironic you bring up Batman v Superman, because you alluded to the fact there wasn't a lot good in that movie.
No.
But one of the things I thought was good, I enjoyed, was Wonder Woman at the end. And
that was a lot of people saying that she was kind of the best part of that movie.
But yeah, Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman, and I thought she hit it out of the park yet again.
Yes, I agree. Okay, let's get into spoiler territory then.
Sweet.
So, in general, then, let's just talk sort of the plot of this movie. In our prep episode, I sort of threw out some of the things I thought would happen. We definitely did get some of that where they talked about she can't know what she is. It turns out that she was, and spoilers, everybody, this is your final spoiler warning. You can stop listening and come back once you've watched the movie. We find out that she is the daughter of Zeus, just like she is in the New 52 version of Wonder Woman written by Brian Azzarello.
Yep.
And I thought that was fine. And it was interesting because it was like they didn't make a huge deal out of it, almost. Like it was a reveal to her, that Ares reveals to her that that's her real parentage, but that wasn't the point of the movie.
Yeah.
The movie wasn't her discovering her origin. So I thought it was interesting how that was in there, but it wasn't like the big thing.
Yeah. Her mother, Hippolyta, did mention before she left if she knew the truth, that would just make her father come for her earlier.
Right.
Which I took as a hint that there was going to be a big reveal later on.
Yeah.
And in the comics, or in the movie, it was mentioned that Zeus brought her to life from a clay baby sculpture.
Right.
Like Zeus,
which is sort of the
that initial spark, which is the Golden Age origin story, and then later on, Zeus is her actual dad.
Yeah, and it was, but I like the idea of that sort of being hidden. Though in the comics, as far as I'm aware, the idea of her being the god killer, created intentionally by Zeus, is not a part of the comics. This is an Easter egg thing, so I guess a quick skip ahead to Easter egg. The God Killer in the DC Universe, there is such a thing, a sword called the God Killer, but it's actually used by Deathstroke as he tries to go and kill a Greek Titan.
Yeah.
So it is a thing, but it's totally different. It's like this shape-shifting weapon, whatever, that can like redirect energy or something that's in the comics. Yeah. But as far as the plot goes, I thought that was good. Let's actually back up to closer to the beginning, though, because the big question that I wrote down is simply, was there too much exposition in this movie? We get a voiceover at the beginning. We get the flashback story of, her whole sort of... Well, the whole story is a flashback.
I was going to say, the whole movie is a flashback. So if you hate flashbacks, don't go see this movie, because the entire 2 hours of this 2 hour and 15-minute movie is a flashback.
So is it, which is why I'm glad they didn't do a flashback in a flashback, but they kind of did, because they had the story that her mom tells her, and then it goes into the animated sort of version of that.
It's a flashback, but it includes a childhood origin story.
Right, or like when
growing up.
When Ares talks about what happened to him, and we get a flashback to Ares stories within the flashback.
Yeah, animated.
Instead of just saying, well, here's your story. But it was just the way they handled the introduction of all the characters, because you get the flashback of Steve Trevor talking about where he came from and the mission that he was on, and you get those visuals that Wonder Woman is imagining, I guess, in this flashback. You get... Hippolyta talking about origins, you get Diana doing a voiceover, and then the voiceover comes back at the end, and it almost felt a little clunky because you kind of forgot the whole thing was supposed to be her just doing an inner monologue.
Yeah, that was the framing device for the movie.
For the whole movie.
Oh, wait, yeah.
So was there too much of that, or do you think that what they used was fine?
They used it sparingly, so I approve. You do it very sparingly, and you kind of, like, again, the whole movie is this flashback and this kind of ancient prophecy coming to fruition. Like, usually those are big signifiers of a crappy movie, flashbacks, ancient prophecies. But since it was used so sparingly, I approve.
Now, what do you think about the shift in the origin story? And I'm not talking about the Zeus thing, but usually... her origin is either intentionally being chosen and sent as an ambassador to man's world, or winning some sort of tournament in that Steve Trevor ends up on Paradise Island, which later is renamed Themyscira in the comics. It was Paradise Island forever before that, which we get in the movie, because Steve Trevor simply can't remember the name of the island, so he just calls it Paradise Island, which I liked. But in some of the origin stories for Wonder Woman is he shows up and then they hold a tournament to see who is their best warrior to go back with him and be their emissary into man's world. And in some versions of the story, like the animated movie version, is she hides who she really is because she is forbidden by her mom. And it isn't because she's really Ares' child or anything. It's just, you're my kid, you're the princess, you don't get to go.
Yeah.
And so it's very like, Princess Jasmine and Aladdin breaking out of the castle kind of thing. Is so she wins the tournament and then, goes and becomes the emissary into man's world and dresses in the outfit she has because it is the colors of the United States of America. So she wears his colors, which is why she has the red bodice and then the underwear, whatever, the trunks, the swimsuit bottom that was blue, blue with white stars. And I felt like they were doing their best to establish that origin story and show her growing up and being trained, and that they were just kind of like, look, we got to get on with our story. We don't have time to dwell on a tournament now. But the idea that she doesn't, I guess in either case she acts impulsively, and does what she's not supposed to. But the idea that she steals these weapons and items and just goes, and then her mom's like, all right, no, you're right, I can't stop you, go for it. Does that change her as a character, do you think? For her to be making that decision as like, I'm stealing things and running away with them versus I'm going to prove that I am worthy by winning this tournament and being the best warrior?
I feel it gives her character more depth.
Okay.
To kind of have this independent agency and not just be divinely prophesized to be the best. She actually has to train. At the same time, we could be here complaining that there was too much training, too many montages.
Yeah.
So they kind of also streamline the story by working that out of her origin. Just show her as a child, training, working really hard, and then as an adult, she has her own independence and agency from the Amazons. She's still very beholden to their culture, still very much appreciates it, but she, again, sees, humans in need and goes to help them. A couple things I want to mention.
Yeah.
In the comics, it was World War II.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, Steve Trevor was an American. In this movie, it's World War I, and Steve Trevor is a Brit.
Without an accent.
Yeah, which was weird to me.
Yeah, they just go with it. Well, I also really liked how they just had the throwaway line of, how do you speak English so well? I was like, oh, we speak hundreds of languages.
Yeah, I love that too.
And the idea that they're sort of immortal as well, that they've been around since the original Greek gods were around. Also interesting that all the other Greek gods are dead. That they removed this option to have the Greek pantheon involved in sort of later movies, because you have basically Zeus, and then you have Ares, and they said Ares killed all of the other gods. So it was like, oh, well, I guess then we're not. They just removed them off the board, so we don't have to deal with them, I guess.
I think the idea is kind of their universe building.
Yeah.
So the idea is the new Zeus is going to be Superman. The new Hades will probably be Batman. Mercury is going to be the Flash. Because in the Justice League trailer, she says, the Age of Heroes is never going to come again. And then Batman, it has to.
Sure.
So
that's interesting. Okay.
I think they're kind of setting that up.
It is true that when Grant Morrison originally took over the Justice League, when he did that early 2000s JLA run, which is just awesome, just a really amazing run, is that's how he eventually built up his team. He started with what they call the Big Seven, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and the Flash. And then eventually he built a team that to him was a pantheon, and he literally selected every single member of the Justice League based on a part of the Greek pantheon. And so he had like Plastic Man as the trickster god, and he had, everybody was based on somebody else. And I find it very interesting that you sort of consider it that way. To me, it's just simplifying things for the future. Is you're world building and you want to keep it simple, so we're just going to say there's Zeus and there's Ares and let's move on. Which is, in my mind, almost too bad, because I was looking forward to getting more involved, and we did on some level, but getting more involved in sort of this side of Wonder Woman's world. Like the Brian Azzarello run doesn't really deal with the greater DC universe at all. It deals strictly with the Greek pantheon and the other gods. Yeah. And this sort of side of her character that no other hero really has in the DC universe is dealing with this old pantheon of gods. And I do think what they did here was fine. Now, while we're talking about all the training montages and stuff, let's talk slow-mo. Because it's clearly there's the Zack Snyder touch in the movie, and it's shot very much sort of almost with his color palette in a lot of ways. Yeah, which did work for me, because it's World War I. If you're going to desaturate something, I think during a horrible war makes sense. Yeah, and they did keep it very saturated during the Themyscira parts. Yeah, on the island. I
agree with you. That was very appropriate.
But there was a lot of slow-mo in that first. Well, not only in her training, but then in the fight between the Amazons and the Germans, and then later on during her fighting. And I don't know when I'll get to that. Maybe we just do a bigger conversation about how the film was shot and cut. But I wanted to mention the slow-mo because there was so much of it in the trailers, and it was like, are we going to get another movie that's 80% slow-mo, like 300 or whatever? What did you think? Too much, too little, a good amount?
I didn't necessarily enjoy the slow-mo. What it was good for was establishing she has these bracelets, the gauntlets, that she uses to deflect bullets. Mm-hmm. And they use slow-mo a lot to establish, her being able to see the bullets coming at, on the fight on the beach, she is able to see the bullets flying through the air. And then later, when she gets those bracelets, she's able to deflect them. And after each subsequent action sequence moved a little bit quicker, which I think was smart.
No, I agree. I think if they really leaned into the slow-mo, it would have been a disservice to it. And I could have done even with a little less, as we got the scenes of her fighting. Like on the actual battlefield where she sort of leads that charge against the Germans when the British troops are entrenched. I thought that was fine. I thought that was appropriate. But then when she's in the town, and it's sort of that fight scene that you see in the trailers where she's sliding around on her shield and stuff like that, I could have done with a little less cutting, a little less slow-mo. And I did find it distracting when they went full CG of her whipping her lasso around, and they had a CG Wonder Woman like kicking people and stuff. Yeah. I definitely caught that, and I wonder how that's going to stand the test of time. I could have done with less of that. I understand they wanted to sort of show more of her prowess, but unless you're doing that all the time, I'm okay with you keeping it fairly simple. It
would be hard to do a realistic action sequence just because, it's a rope, basically. It's her weapon.
Well, that was fine. I mean, doing it that way was fine. You knew it was always going to have a lot of wire work and stuff of people getting yanked around. Yeah. It was just, there was just that one shot which went full, Matrix Reloaded, where she became a full CG character. And it was done much better than, obviously, the Matrix or earlier films with their, more limited technology. But it's the one where she, whips guys through the air and, does, a midair roundhouse kick on somebody and that sort of thing.
Well, speaking of the Matrix Reloaded,
okay,
that did not age well. This will not age well. No. I'll admit to that. Okay, it will not age well.
I feel like a good portion of it will, but I think all the slow-mo and the very visual aspects. That said, I liked how much of it didn't look like it was shot in front of a green screen. The stuff that was very much so, and you could very much tell. Though in some cases, there are some gorgeous moments in this movie. There are definitely some shots where they're establishing her and just to show her in sort of full glory, when she's slowly floating down, or, they slow her down as she's falling after doing the big move at the end and that kind of thing. And they have the sunrise coming, and so there's some red behind her and the different hues in the sky. And I thought some of that was absolutely gorgeous. And I liked the way that, for the most part, the movie was shot. Again, I could do without some of the slow-mo and some of the desaturation, but it was not what I was afraid of and what we talked about in the preview episode, that idea that it's just going to be this all super Zack Snyder-y, like, where is the color? I feel like we did get it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Going back to the slow-mo,
yeah.
It was used a lot, maybe too much for certain tastes, but that is something that Zack Snyder uses a lot, and I think the purpose of that is to get you invested emotionally in the action sequences, and it speaks to the comic books, these splash pages.
Right.
Like, it won't just slow down, it'll sometimes come to complete halt. Like, look at how cool this thing we've set up is.
The framing and everything in there. And
which bugs the film nerd side of me.
Yes.
But indulges the comic nerd side of me.
I think that's a really good point. And one of the big things I walked away of this movie with was, like, I think kids are going to like it. You know, there's violence, but not a lot of blood. Yeah. You know, there's people getting stabbed and shot.
Very happy.
But it wasn't
there were
overall
kids
gore.
at this screening I went to. And I was like, this is a role model for kids.
Right, exactly. And so Patty Jenkins, the director of this movie, has apparently, I was looking at Reddit right before we started recording, has signed on to do Wonder Woman 2. So they're planning a sequel because this one is doing so well. Good. Happy with Patty Jenkins in this film as a director and excited to see her take on the role again? Or would you want to see somebody else helming it?
No, I think she did a great job with this film. Like you mentioned earlier, the fact that they've kind of cut off the Greek gods aspect of it, it's kind of like, who will she fight in the next one? Yeah. But one of her major adversaries in this film is Dr. Poison, Dr. Maru. And I think that if they're going to delve into her rogues gallery, you know, Cheetah or Dr. Psycho or someone, would be great for the next film. So.
I think the way that Cheetah is being handled right now in the Greg Rucka run might be a way that they would do it, where it's this archaeologist who was friends with Wonder Woman and was actually instrumental in helping her get used to the real world, and then gets attacked by this ancient god or whatever and turned into... Because I feel like for most people, Cheetah is pretty much the Wonder Woman villain they know, besides Ares.
Yeah. For me, yes.
Yeah, I would be excited to see if they go down sort of the Brian Azzarello route and show us, you know, make Zeus kind of the bad guy. If Zeus has another child and the mother wants to keep the child away from Zeus and that sort of thing. Because that was... Like, I haven't read a lot of Wonder Woman. I've read the current run and the Brian Azzarello run. And I think the Brian Azzarello one is... I like it more than the current Greg Rucka run. As much as I love the art on both of them too, because they're very different art styles and the way they're drawn. But yeah, I'm also with you. I think Patty Jenkins did a good job. I look forward to seeing what else she does. I would be curious to see, because I don't think she had a whole lot to do with the plot of this movie or the script. I think she was strictly a director, so it wasn't like a James Gunn with Guardians. Completely hands-on, doing whatever they want. I would be interesting to see what Patty Jenkins could do with a little more creative control in that aspect, and being instrumental in sort of shaping, because this did not feel, I'll say, it did not feel like an auteur sort of, like a James Gunn's, or like what
she didn't write the screenplay, she didn't imagine the story,
and it didn't seem to have a very individual visual styling. Like, it looked fine and there was gorgeous stuff in there, but you don't watch it being like, this is an Edgar Wright movie. You know, it doesn't have that sort of idea to it. So I'd be curious what that would look like if you gave the movie to her completely to do something what she wanted.
I have an idea for the sequel.
Sure.
Because one of the things I wish they had done, not really, but I was like, maybe they will do that, is have Wonder Woman fighting in every war. So, fighting in World War II, maybe just a montage at the end of
like
her.
In, what was it, X-Men Origins Wolverine, where you just get an opening sequence of a montage.
Fighting in the Gulf War.
Yeah.
So here's an idea. Keep a female director, Catherine Bigelow. So basically it's Wonder Woman in the Hurt Locker.
In the Hurt Locker, yeah. Yeah. Doesn't need the suit, just walks up to the bomb and puts the shield on and stands on it.
Just gonna...
Yeah. So... Going through the rest of the movie, we have the big plot twist, of course, of who we think Ares is, and we find out that's not Ares, that general guy is just a dude high on super PCP
Yeah.
or whatever.
Leidendorf, I believe was
Yeah,
his name.
who is an actual World War II. He was an actual Nazi. He didn't die during the war, though. He lived until, I don't know, or he died in 1939. It was something I saw online where a lot of the characters we see in this movie were actual people, but how they interact with everything is a little different. But some of the boats that you see and things were actual boats, and some of the people that we see were actual people during World War I.
Which counters my idea of
I
having
don't know why I
Wonder
said
Woman.
Nazi. That makes more sense. I'm sorry. It was World War I, so he was a German, and he lived until I think it was 1939.
Well, that's a perfect rebuke of my idea of having Wonder Woman fight in every war. You couldn't have that because, Wonder Woman would be able to stop the war with her amazing superpowers.
Well, not necessarily.
Or at least make an impact.
Make an impact, absolutely. But I think that was sort of the point. And which is, I think very important, is it's a World War I movie, but it's right at the very, very end of World War I.
Yeah.
So she is not a Captain America character that's instrumental in stopping the war and bringing it to a halt. She's just working on this side thing of a rebel who's going to continue.
I will come to Captain America's defense. He also wasn't instrumental in that movie to stopping the war. He's more of a PR stunt the Americans pulled. Plays that part well, and then comes up against the Red Skull, and then obviously
and again the
crashes
side
into the
thing
ocean.
of Hydra, not the Nazis at large. And I agree, and I like that approach. I think it would have been fine if they wanted to say, here's our universe, we had superheroes in the war. It'd be very Watchmen of them, but I'm happy they didn't do it, and I think they handled that right, where we get to see her in action in World War I, but it's really more against this splinter group sort of that, they're still at war. The armistice wasn't signed yet, but I liked that they did that. But let's talk about the twist then. The big twist of Remus Lupin, David Thewlis, Ares being the real bad guy, being Ares versus this other guy who was just, again, high on super PCP or something. Like, we don't really have to... I don't know, they don't really dig into what that is, and they're like, bring your strength back, and he's just like,
okay,
oh yeah,
I developed this for some reason, this gas, this poison that...
But we don't give it to everybody at large? So we'd have super soldiers, so clearly the red herring thing. I liked that twist, though.
Me too. I
thought it was good, and that obviously brings up questions, of his idea of, like, I inspire them to make the weapons, but they make the war. And I thought that part was fine, but the idea of then why your role in the British side kind of thing, I think they just did it because it was a good
I also
rug
think
pull.
Him being on the British side of things, he was trying to keep the war going.
Right.
He was, what was it?
Or providing humanity with the tools to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. While simultaneously inspiring Dr. Poison.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about... Well, I guess we'll save that for characters. I was going to ask about Dr. Poison, but I'll hold off on that. Let's talk about sort of the last big idea of the movie. The idea of her saying, she realizes that it's not really Dr. Poison's fault, or decides not to kill Dr. Poison. But then the very end of the movie, in her voiceover, is she talks about how, like, love is the thing that needs to win in the end. Now, I like Wonder Woman as a character who embraces the idea of love. I like it when she does the truth, wisdom, peace more than love. I feel love is sometimes a bit softer than that. It feels softer because it's like, it feels more of the hippie ideal of we just need to love one another versus the, wisdom and understanding when you have a disagreement, so you have peace rather than just love. I don't know that I was a fan of that. I don't know that I was a fan of her saying, love is what triumphs. I wanted her to, because it's like, love is the thing that wins, but a lightning bolt through the chest will also do the job when you need to.
Yeah.
I would have much rather her try to talk down Ares instead of just the speeches at one another and then I kill you. I wanted to see her peacefully figure out or try to peacefully resolve the issue with Ares rather than just flat out killing him. I felt like that didn't quite mix with the message she was sending.
Yeah, I agree with you that it kind of rings hollow, that she's like, love is the answer. right before or right after she straight up stabbed a guy through the chest with a sword.
Yeah.
That did kind of weaken the message. It does harken back to the character's conception and creation. I'll probably talk to you some about this. William Moulton Marsden created the character.
Yes.
And he came to his wife saying, comic books are a medium that's being underutilized. There could be a character that instead of like Superman, Batman, who have you,
right,
solves everything by punching the bad guys, solves problems with love.
Okay.
And,
yes, you are completely right.
And his wife said, that's a great idea. One thing, you have to make
it a woman.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about that last week a bit too. Yeah. And that's fair. Okay. I'll give that to you. That makes a lot more sense. I just would have liked to have seen a little more of that in practice. I feel like they did the big moments, like when they have, the moment of the sniper kills the person and she tries to rush the family inside, and then later the town is killed and she comes back. I wanted to see some of that. I was waiting for it, I guess, that rage that she feels at everybody being dead and sort of that feeling a little useless. And just seeing the horror of war and grasping the idea that this is more than just an evil god. I loved the moment where she believes that she kills Ares and realizes that, no, the evil, all men are good and evil at the same time, and we're capable of both. I really enjoyed that part. I wanted to see that a little bit earlier, I think. I was waiting for that transition to happen earlier so you could get maybe not quicker character development, but I'm trying to remember the exact moment in the movie, because I feel like it was earlier when some of the people were dying and she sees, these people, we need to help them. Like, we can't, we need to keep going. And she's in the trenches and she finally says, screw this, I'm going to do this thing. I kind of wanted her to, when she jumped into the Germans' trenches, I kind of wanted that to be the moment where she realizes, oh, wait, these are just
humans.
Boys.
Yeah.
And they're also terrified and they also don't want to die. They're not evil because they're evil and it's because of Ares. And we didn't really get that until the very, very end, where you have Steve Trevor's team and they're sort of, throwing their arms around the German soldiers because everybody's kind of like, is it done? It's finally over. We don't need to fight each other anymore. And so we got a moment of that, but I was kind of hoping for more of that, because I feel like that much better defines Wonder Woman as a character, is the understanding that you have to be a warrior when you have to be a warrior, but you always try and seek a diplomatic resolution, and this is why. Not just the, you do it because we're good people and this is what good people do, but to actually explain that, everybody is just people being thrown at each other for other people's purposes, kind of thing. But again, I feel like what they did was fine. I just would have liked to have seen a little more of that in there. And we get some of it with Ares. We get some of it with him explaining, like, I don't make anybody do anything. I give them the inspiration to make the tools of war, but I don't make anybody use them. And you're kind of like, well, that's sort of like, here's a TV, don't turn it on.
Here's a gun, don't shoot.
Yeah. Here's this shiny red button. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you to push it. I'm not going to tell you to not. Here's a button. But I don't know, any thoughts on that? Like, do you think the character progression was even and appropriate? And did you like, how they handled that sort of war versus peace idea?
I will say that I agree with you 100%. I think they could have delved more into the war. Mm-hmm. And in that approach, the diplomatic approach of, hey, these are just boys fighting and dying just on both sides.
Right.
They could have done that, but I would have liked to have seen, just in general, more of Wonder Woman fighting in the war, less of the Greek god stuff. They tacked on at the end, but they also kind of kept that thread going throughout the movie.
Where that was her mission. Yeah. It had nothing to do with the big... But it was with the idea that kill Ares and the rest of the war stops.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was good. And I suppose if they had really leaned into the politics of the war and the idea of the innocents on both sides of a war, even, against the Germans, who are always painted as the bad guys because they were the aggressors in the war, that the actual German soldiers aren't necessarily bad people just because they're Germans. It's the people making the decisions that really hold the responsibility. But that idea of if they dug too into that, maybe it would have felt too political.
Yeah.
And maybe it would have hurt the overall message of the movie. Because also keep in mind, this was, I feel, built to be a 4-quadrant film. It was meant to appeal to kind of everybody. Because there was some more adult stuff in there. There was some sillier things. We don't have to deal with like flat out fart humor or anything like that for kids. But clearly this was meant to be a movie that kids could enjoy as well. Oh. And I feel that in that, maybe it was more appropriate to stay away from that, even though I, as a, 30, however old I am, 32, something, whatever age I am, would have wanted to see. So I'm not saying it was a bad decision on their part to leave it out. It's just something I personally, I think, would have enjoyed.
As adult males, we would have liked to see it, but this is a movie, a superhero movie.
Right.
So it was meant to appeal to kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that,
I think getting into the whole, like, Kaiser assassination, fall of the Ottoman Empire would have kind of,
maybe slowed
dragged
it down a little
for them.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little about the characters themselves then. And the actors playing them and sort of the performances and everything. I thought everybody was really well portrayed in this movie. I thought the actors all did a good job. I don't feel like any characters were like, all right, I don't buy you. Yeah. I feel you're going too far over the top. I felt like everybody did a good job. I guess we'll start just with Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I thought she did a great job.
Yeah, I haven't seen her in anything besides Batman v Superman. As this character, but I still enjoyed her, and granted, she doesn't have a ton to do. It's basically about opening up to man's world and showing empathy towards Steve, and that's about as far stretch besides badass warrior woman that she has to do.
Now, was her versus Steve Trevor? This was another thing that the wife and I were talking about last week. Was that idea of how much were they going to share the spotlight? What is it going to be, this issue of we're following her, it's her movie, but really we're kind of following Steve Trevor as the audience surrogate, and it becomes a movie about a guy again, instead of actually being a female-led film. I felt like the balance seemed okay. I'm thinking that maybe if it was a male-led movie, maybe we would have seen more of the Wonder Woman character doing things, but I felt like it was pretty well handled. But what do you think?
I thought it was handled beautifully because the way Steve Trevor came across to me, love interest.
Yeah.
He's the manic pixie dream guy.
But was also able to hold his own. They didn't do the, because it was the damsel in distress, it was the gentleman in, there was a term for it. And we used it, because I looked it up because it was used last week and they used to use it. But the man in danger idea instead of the woman in danger kind of thing. They didn't do a ton of that, and I was okay with that. I wanted a little more, just to paint he is Lois Lane in this. He's spunky and he's a go-getter and he does his best, but he still needs to be saved. And they didn't do a ton of that, but I felt that both characters were handled well. I mean, how did you like Steve Trevor in general?
I enjoyed him. I'm a big fan of Chris Pine, and I thought he played him very well. A lot of that irreverent humor comes up, with Steve kind of acclimating her to the modern, or quote-unquote modern world. Going back to the comics, I do not remember the author or the run, but one of my favorite Wonder Woman origin stories depicts Wonder Woman as a young girl, meeting Steve Trevor as a young boy, and keeping him secret from the other Amazons.
Oh, interesting.
He's his pet, or he's her pet boy. Like, she knows men aren't allowed, so she kind of keeps him secret, just hidden behind some bushes, and just goes and feeds him and clothes him. And
that's fun.
I enjoyed that. But that's a comic reference.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I've read that one.
Yeah, I read it on Scans Daily, which is a website you can go to read snippets of comics. Anyway.
So let's talk Ares then, I guess. He doesn't really become a major player until the third act, until they do the twist and you find out that the general guy is not, in fact, Ares. And he's played by David Thewlis, who, it took me a while, and once it clicked, I was like, why do I know that voice? Why do I know that face? Why do I know that mustache? And I was like, oh, it's Lupin. from the Harry Potter movies. And then it all clicked. And then I was kind of like, David Thewlis in a suit of armor, but with the same David Thewlis mustache underneath. I had kind of a hard time taking that as physically imposing.
Yeah.
But I liked him more as... I thought he was a great choice in that he's making the philosophical arguments. And they still have to do the we're going to punch each other because it is a superhero movie and it does also need to appeal to kids. And, he has telekinesis as well, as everything else. I feel like I definitely liked him more as that. I don't know that I bought him as Ares. It's hard if you get what I'm saying. I don't buy him as the big, powerful bad guy, but I definitely buy him as the evil genius philosopher.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes. David Thewlis plays the big bad on the latest season 3 of Fargo, which I am watching currently.
Okay.
And he's much the same. This sort of not physically imposing bad guy, but sort of this philosophically very dark manipulator kind of guy. And that is what he plays on that show. And he's very believable and scary playing that. I also kind of saw Ares almost as two parts. There's the evil philosophizing, bad guy. This is man's nature. I just provide the tools.
Right.
All of that jazz. And then there's the, hulked out, muscle bound,
right.
Physically imposing who has to punch Wonder Woman. And that's like a whole different character.
Yeah, it was kind of a switch. I left to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was wearing the armor, and I was like, wait, I totally missed something. And then it kind of turns into the boss fight, which I guess you need. And like I said, I would have liked that.
They
to
need
turn
it
out
for
a little
the video
differently,
game.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have the boss level where everybody's throwing lightning at one another. Any other thoughts on David Thewlis before I move on to other characters?
Big fan of his. Again, he's in Fargo the latest season, which I'm watching with my parents, and he just creeps out my mom every time he's on screen. She just, no, I hate that guy. I can't watch anymore, and she'll walk out of the room.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So really pulls it off. Let's talk about our other bad guys then. So there's and I didn't even write down a name, but the evil general guy. I think you had the name. I don't remember what his name was. Whatever.
Ludendorff.
There you go.
Ludendorff, I believe.
The evil general guy, and then Dr. Poison, who, just to throw another Easter egg in here, is one of Wonder Woman's old villains from the comic books, and was a woman who dressed very androgynously, dressed as a man in order to be taken more seriously as sort of a bad guy. And wore, this green suit with sort of a black mask or goggles, and which is why I think they showed her with goggles sometimes. And she does wear green every once in a while in the movie as well, which is sort of a throwback to her comic book origins. I really liked, Robin Wright?
Yeah, she plays as Antipani.
Oh, that's right.
Her aunt.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman's aunt.
So who is the actress? I guess I didn't look it up then, who the actress was that played Dr. Poison. But I thought that actress did a great job, because when you're wearing that facial prosthetic, the idea is you have to act everything with your eyes. Like, she wasn't able to even do anything with the other side of her mouth. It wasn't like a Two-Face scenario. Yeah. It was I can't really move my face because I'm wearing this prosthetic. So to be able to push out the emotions that she was able to, and still sort of it didn't come across as like I'm doing science for science sake, and it clearly seemed to have evil intentions of, I want to make this thing, and it isn't I'm doing this to end the war, I'm making the atom bomb kind of thing, I'm making the ultimate weapon that will scare everybody into not fighting. She's clearly doing it to kill a bunch of people for evil's sake, I guess. But I thought that actress did a good job. The general guy was just I feel like you could swap him out with kind of anybody. Swap him out with Brian Cox.
Exactly. Could have been the Red Skull.
It could have been the Red Skull. Just give an evil guy that stands around and looks evil, except he has his super PCP. Which, again, I get it, red herring, it makes cool. Yeah. But that idea of, is that not going to show up anywhere? Like, where does that... She just got the recipe from Ares, sort of? I don't know. But what are your thoughts on we think are our main villains for most of the movie?
I enjoyed Dr. Poison, Dr. Maru. I thought she was, visually a very cool villain, and kind of ethically very cool in that she kind of mirrors a lot of World War One doctors and scientists who did develop the gas technologies.
A good Bond villain.
Yeah.
Was very much kind of what she felt like.
Yeah, she would have been great as a Bond villain.
So it's not physically imposing, but it doesn't matter. It's the idea they're so dangerous because they're so intelligent.
Which, Steve Trevor was a spy. I would have loved this scene where she puts him in an intricate death trap.
That's right. Yep, that he has to escape. That's true. We didn't get any real intricate death traps, did we? In that movie. We didn't get any, like, of the super science sort of things that you usually got in Golden Age wartime comics of you fought the bad guy because they had whatever super weapon. Though it kind of was. It was the super gas that was also corrosive. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. I guess we didn't touch on, when we were talking Steve Trevor, we didn't really touch on his death. I totally saw it coming because it was a World War I movie, so he wasn't going to be around in the present time. So I didn't see a way we were going to get out of that without him sacrificing himself in some way. I thought the way they did it was fine. I thought he played it beautifully. I almost wish we didn't get to go back to the scene where he's talking to her and she can't hear him because of the bomb blast. Give me that lost in translation moment where one person says the thing to the other and we never find out what it is. Like, I thought that would have been beautiful. I didn't need for him to say, I gotta go.
Again, this is a superhero movie appealing to kids, so the whole... What did they say? What did they not say? Yeah. It's not going to go over well.
I suppose
with
so.
With an 11-year-old.
Right. But I did like his death scene. I guess we're not going to address the idea of assuming the explosion was big enough to take the gas along with it, or that the gas doesn't pass into the upper atmosphere and cause trouble later on. Yeah, like, it's that whole idea of we're going to fly it up high and then blow it up. Be like, it doesn't... I mean, there's also, you know...
It's still dispersed.
The
it's
environment.
In the atmosphere
like, how long does it sit until it's bad? Like, that one city gets hit with the bomb. Like, does that linger? We don't... it just gets passed along the wind? Does that mean it's killing trees and plants and animals as it floats along the fields?
Which the gases in World War One would do.
Yeah.
They would, kill the grass, kill the trees, kill the animals, and kill the soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. Etta Candy.
She had a very small kind of comic relief bit in the movie, but I still liked her.
I really liked how she didn't become what I was afraid she was going to become, which was comic relief, but throughout the spunky sidekick, or as the wife was saying, the fat friend. She's like, I do not want to go and see a movie where you just have the fat friend who just stands there to make Wonder Woman look prettier. And I feel like we didn't get that.
No.
We didn't, we talked about her Golden Age origins where she would say things like, for the love of chocolate, and was like, woo woo was her rallying cry, and she'd go and punch people, and she's a spunky, heavier woman who's, just very much this weird stereotype clown sort of character. And I'm happy they didn't do that. Like, at no time was she ever shown as not being capable.
Yeah.
Just because she was the comic relief. She was just would throw jokes out and little one-liners, and then they're like, you're going to run the operation. I love that.
Yeah.
And he's like, here you go. And so she was completely competent in that role. It wasn't I don't know what's going on. She kind of gets pushed aside by the guy we find out is Ares to hand the phone over. But she's like, here's the news. Here's what's going on. We know this. So I thought they actually handled her character very well. That they showed her as joking around, but being serious when she needed to be.
If anything, Wonder Woman makes her look smarter, not the other way around.
Yes.
And if anything, she's a little bit too capable. Like, the idea you go from being a receptionist to commanding troop positions and coordinating attacks.
But if she is a secretary to a spy,
exactly.
I imagine she needs to know that anyway. She's probably helping in transferring that information.
Familiar with military procedures.
Right. And that sort of thing. And I thought that was fine. I almost feel sad then because we know that we're not going to see any more of any of those characters unless our next Wonder Woman goes to like World War II or something. Because I would actually like to see more of that. I would like to see Diana and Etta Candy interacting more. I'm curious if the sequel is going to be a modern movie, or I would love to. I hope they do another period piece with the character because I think she works well in that frame. And I don't know, I hope it's not like Bruce Wayne's like, hey, so I found this other picture. What can you tell me? And she's like, put the kettle on.
Yeah,
I have a story to tell.
You.
Yeah, exactly.
But they could do two things. Etta Candy Jr.
Okay.
Or, her great-granddaughter.
Right.
Or they could do TV show, spinoff. Etta Candy, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. Yes, they could. Well, while we're talking Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the rest of the crew, I don't know enough. I have to claim ignorance here. When I was looking Easter eggs, I didn't see anything about it. I don't know if they are based on characters from the early Wonder Woman comics. It was not uncommon for that to be a thing. Sergeant Fury's Howling Commandos, as an example, is you would get comics with a racially diverse or nationally diverse mix of characters that serve as your background. Very Hogan's Heroes kind of ideas. You're going to have one person from each. The X-Men was reformed with that idea. Colossus from Russia, Wolverine from Canada, Storm from Africa. But I don't know if those are actual comic characters. That said, I thought it was fine. I thought they did a good mix of it. They got to throw out the one line of the guy being like, I want to be an actor, but I'm not the right color. And you have the Scottish sniper who's suffering severe PTSD, but is still going back in, and then we had the Native American guy who served as a smuggler, I guess, right?
Yeah,
it was
he
his
the
job.
Han Solo.
Right, it was the Han Solo character who said he didn't pick sides, but then pretty much picked a side. And his idea of, he's like, I don't really have a home anymore. And they're like, well, who took it? And he's like, him. And he goes, Steve Trevor. I loved that.
Yeah,
I love the idea
me
that
too.
it's there and that's man. And so she's getting this wider understanding of mankind and man's world in this war, and then kind of being able to work together sort of afterwards anyway. What did you think of this supporting cast?
That whole A-team that
Yeah.
Steve Trevor assembles.
Yeah.
I liked it.
They needed to weld some things to a van.
Yeah.
For my opinion, they need to homemade build a tank.
Yeah, again,
But beyond
that's
that-
another thing that could work as a TV show.
That's right.
Just Steve Trevor's Howling Commandos.
Yes.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. Again, I think that was something they could have gone more in depth with, but for the sake of just being a streamlined movie, I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I don't think you're going to see action figures of any of those characters.
Yeah.
Because that was the other thing of this movie. It wasn't here's Batman and 8 million different versions of him and his different costumes and his different accessories and vehicles and stuff like that. This didn't feel, and I think that's a huge important point to make, this did not feel like a movie that was made strictly to sell toys.
No.
It was not a movie that was made strictly to sell merchandise. It was just a decent movie. And I think once they realize that, the merchandising will follow. And I know you might have to make some allowances, but there was no invisible jet. There was no special wonder scuba tank.
To be honest, an invisible jet is a hard thing to market.
No, it's just clear plastic. You just don't
Sell
have to
them
paint
an empty box.
Here you go. It's immaterial too. But yeah, I think that was a smart move, that they weren't so. It was almost kind of a Rogue One sort of feel, here are your characters. We're not going to really dive into their backstories. You're going to get just enough. And I don't know that anybody's going to come away being like, that was my favorite character. None of them, they weren't the Jay and Silent Bobs of the movie. They weren't the Jack Sparrow, the side character that's the utter and complete standout. I don't feel like there was one. And if there was, it was Dr. Poison, because she wasn't really the main villain.
No.
But she was the most visually compelling of all of our side characters. Because even there was the character who does play her aunt, the Robin Wright character. Yeah. I didn't get super emotionally attached to that character. I didn't get super emotionally attached to Hippolyta. So, and Artemis was there too, actually. They don't really dig into the fact that it was Artemis. But they were there, but it wasn't necessarily visually compelling. I guess maybe you could sell action figures of the various Amazon armor, because they did all wear different looking armor. They didn't have one uniform that they all wore. And I thought that was cool to see sort of the different styles. But beyond that, I don't see this as being that kind of movie where all the supporting cast needs to be made for action figures.
Yeah, and I don't think they were looking at it from a strictly marketing point of view. There's no kids who are going to be leaving this movie being like, I'm going to be Antiope for Halloween.
Right. It's going to be Wonder Woman. And they knew that. And I thought that was smart. And I thought it was smart of the studio to know that and to say, we're not going to make you make all of these side characters super specific just so, you can sell merchandising later on. I think that's just such a smart move. Where like Guardians of the Galaxy, it feels like they let the director do what he wanted, but every character in that movie is clearly a character that can have its own merchandising sort of thing. It wasn't like that. But then again, this wasn't also an ensemble. It had a supporting cast, but not enough to be an ensemble movie. It was clearly about Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman. If there's no other characters you want to talk about, I just have some very brief Easter eggs we haven't mentioned yet.
Sure, go ahead. Fire away.
There's the ice cream scene where she gets to taste ice cream and says, "You should be very proud of this." There's a couple different versions of that out there, I think. I think there's a version in the current Wonder Woman run where they're telling her origin story. And there's also a version, I think, in the New 52 Justice League run where she talks about ice cream being very wonderful. But I think the line of "you should be very proud" is in the current Wonder Woman run. And a moment like that also shows up in Justice League War, the animated version of the first Justice League storyline from the New 52. I think it's in there as well. And I love that. It's one of those, like, give us those little small moments. Because the current Wonder Woman run deals a lot with, like, her learning English and stuff as well. And she doesn't speak the language. So they use the Dr. Minerva? Barbara Minerva, the character who becomes Cheetah, is used as a translator because she speaks the ancient language that Wonder Woman's language is adapted from. So it's very much like a Stargate thing, where he kind of speaks their language and then has to learn the finer points and becomes sort of the translator for everybody. So because they didn't have that, they still needed some things where it's not just the clothes you wear are terrible, I can't beat people up in this, to... you have ice cream or babies. I loved the baby moment because she had never seen one before.
Yeah,
and to show the softer side of Diana was very important instead of just the righteous, white knight version of the character. If people are hurt, so I'm going to help. It was that she actually cared and had a softer side. So the ice cream thing is from the comics. I already talked about the God Killer sword. Zack Snyder actually does show up in this movie. He's one of the British soldiers in the trenches right before she leads the charge. When she's trying on outfits, they say she's on outfit 226.
Yeah.
That was a reference to the final issue of the Wonder Woman run that started right after Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, I was going to say that was when it quit, or they canceled Wonder Woman in 86.
Yeah, or they restarted it. Yeah, and they restarted it soon after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it got up to issue 226, and it was actually Greg Rucka writing then as well, and that was the storyline where Wonder Woman had like the leather jacket look and stuff like that, and then that ended with issue 226. So that's what that was a reference to. What else do I have on here? Just at the end, they had a special thanks or thanks to, and it was a long list of comic book creators who had worked on Wonder Woman runs over the years, like Phil Jimenez and Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chang and the current team working on the book. And I thought that was really nice because there are, I'm sure, little things pulled from some of those other runs. And I just like when that's appreciated. I thought it was odd that they did based on characters by DC, but then they said that Wonder Woman was created by, William
Marston.
Right. But that's it. Like, there weren't a whole lot of Easter eggs, and is that a good thing? This is my next question for you. Would you have liked this? Because I assume you've read Wonder Woman books, you're a Wonder Woman fan, but if this was loaded with, Easter eggs from the 90s run by, Phil Jimenez, and who else was working on that book? I feel like I actually have an issue of that, because there was like not Trial of the Gods, a Tournament of the Gods, or something like that, a Wonder Woman story. Would anybody have remembered those enough outside of the hardcore Wonder Woman fans out there? Would this movie have been better off if it was stuffed with Easter eggs, or was it good to actually back off and have next to none in there?
I enjoy Easter eggs when I recognize them as, a fan, and it kind of make my ears perk up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel the need to arbitrarily insert them. If you're just trying to tell a story, tell it. Don't feel the need to include a bunch of stuff for fans.
There was no Stan Lee cameo.
Yeah.
Where Marvel...
Although that would have been great.
Yes. Though Marvel oversaturates sometimes with their Easter eggs. So I felt like this was fine. I was actually really happy walking up, be like, you know what? There wasn't 800 things that I would point to the person sitting next to me and say, oh, that's that thing, that's that thing, that's that thing. As great as that is as a comic book fan, because I'm like, I think most comic book fans in that I know Wonder Woman, I've read Wonder Woman comics, but I don't know what you could throw out there because she's always reinvented almost every single time somebody picks her up and does something totally different. That, unless they threw out a reference to her all-white costume when she was like a detective that did karate or whatever, maybe that'll be in the sequel.
Yeah, when she joined the Mod Squad.
Yeah, basically. So let's close it out by asking sort of the big questions then. Everybody was worried that if this didn't work, the DC Extended Universe would sort of fall flat, and we wouldn't get a Flash movie, we wouldn't get a Cyborg movie. We know we're getting Aquaman because it's shooting, and we know we're getting Justice League, but beyond that, it was is this going to be the death knell for the DC films? If this doesn't work, we're not going to get a Captain Marvel, we're not going to get, a Black Widow movie maybe someday. We're never going to get a female-led superhero movie. I'm not counting Catwoman. And I guess there was Supergirl way back in the day, but you know what I mean, the modern day. So did this succeed well enough that those things are safe? That is this putting the DCEU back on the right track?
I won't say this has saved the DC universe, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have one of the win
good
column.
Movie.
Yeah.
Something worthwhile. Yeah, that's true. Well, now, were you a fan of Man of Steel?
I did not hate Man of Steel the way a lot of other people seem to. I walked out of thinking, hey, you know what? That's a pretty good movie. Not your typical Superman movie.
Right.
It's not, the Richard Donner,
super inspiring kind of.
Yeah, swelling score that
Yeah.
you walk out with a smile on your face. Mm-hmm. But I didn't hate it just because it wasn't your typical Superman movie. I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Okay. But this certainly, I hope that this goes on and makes enough money to prove that you can have a female-helmed superhero movie. That's totally fine. There is a market out there. It's not just boys, and boys will buy a Wonder Woman figure, Like, I'm trying to think if I have one. I don't know if I actually own a Wonder Woman figure, but I don't think they made it for the ones that I bought. Like, because I have the ones that were Justice League, and they were based off of the Total Justice line, which was an awful line of toys, but it was the first one where they made a Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. But I have like a Huntress figure, and I have like I have no problem with, depending on how you sculpt them, make them look like an actual character. Don't make them look like this runway model with back problems, the Rob Liefeld, super arched back thing.
Although that would be kind of great.
Well,
to give
they
3D
exist,
Rob Liefeld drawing.
Yeah. Just so people can look at it and go, I don't understand what's happening. Yeah,
he doesn't understand how perspective works.
Yeah. But I hope that they do well enough in the merchandise. Well, if they've already greenlit a Wonder Woman 2, we know that they're at least going to move forward and know that this is a viable property, that it doesn't have to be just Superman and Batman. To not only get a Wonder Woman movie, but to know we're going to get a Wonder Woman sequel is really cool. There's been, obviously, the TV show in the 70s, and they had an attempt at a new Wonder Woman show that never made it past the pilot stage. But the idea that it doesn't need to be relegated to television, that it can be big box office movie money, I think is really important. So how important then do you feel, and again, this is a couple of white guys talking, so I understand this, but culturally, is this going to be a huge deal, or is it going to be looked at as sort of like like Lucy, or a what was it, Salt, the Angelina Jolie, because we've had female-led action movies in the past. Is this just going to be another, or is it a really big deal that it was a Wonder Woman movie?
I don't think, just because we have had other female-led action movies recently, this will be a huge thing. But it may show that there's some viability in this character to build a franchise, that hopefully they will say, hey, you know what? This isn't just a boys' club. We can have some strong female characters too.
Directed by women.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to see female writers on the sequel too, by the way. I think that'd be good.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lucy, there was a trailer before my screening for a film starring Charlize Theron called Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
Just based on the trailer, that could have been a Black Widow movie.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. It was because when it comes to female-led movies, especially an action movie, they're always like spies and special agents. Have you noticed this?
Yeah.
They're always special operatives. They're always Jason Bourne, female Jason Bourne types. La Femme Nikita, Haywire.
Jennifer Bourne.
Yeah, exactly. Jenny Bourne. I watched Jenny Bourne. Well, it doesn't have to be Jenny. I don't want to make it sound like I'm relegating that to a nickname just because it's a female or anything like that. But yeah, it's either that or they're like a survivor in a horror film.
Yeah.
Or it's the rom-com and they're goofy and they trip on things because they wear glasses. And I also like that line where they give her glasses and they're like, oh yeah, she has glasses because now she's not the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. I thought that was nice and that was sort of clever. And I think I agree with you. I don't think this is going to be a giant zeitgeist changing movie. I don't feel like it's going to have that level of impact. I hope it has an impact on superhero movies in general, on people's views of comic books in general, that this was not... The other thing you notice, the way she was shot and the way this movie was shot, there were no butt shots. There were no obvious, like, look at how gorgeous her body is stuff. They did it with Chris Pine, which I thought was perfect. I was going to say,
Chris Pine had a couple of butt shots.
Right, but there was no thing where it's like, oh, he catches her as she's bathing or something.
Yeah.
Like, Wonder Woman was not sexualized at all in this movie, and that was great. They did have the love story, and they suggested a love scene, but we didn't get it.
There is a scene where Wonder Woman catches Chris Pine bathing.
Right. But like I said, so there was that in there, but herself, the character, and it's the idea that we don't need, like the way Black Widow is usually shot. We usually have to get a Scarlett Johansson butt shot in the movies and that sort of thing, is we didn't have to deal with that. And even though the costume doesn't really make sense that she's running around in a corset that's not held up by anything, there's no shoulder straps or any of that, it was still shot in a way that this is our hero. We're not going to dwell on the fact that it's a woman. It's not going to have, because people are like, oh, a woman is here. And some people are like, wow, she's, gorgeous, or she's a goddess. But they don't shove in your face like somebody whistling at her and she breaks their hand.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's the right, I feel like no matter what I say here, I'm going to get into trouble.
Yeah. It's the right balance of, because there are scenes like one of, Steve Trevor's, A-Team is like, so you're telling me there's a whole island of women and no men?
Yeah. So, and that's true. And there were people laughing, and there were...
a lot of laugh lines in this movie. My theater broke out into laughter dozens of times.
And I was not in a full theater because it was an early screening, but there was a lot of women in there, and it was the women that I was hearing laughing during the movie. I don't know if I heard any of the guys laughing out loud, but I heard women laughing out loud during the movie, and that was good. But like I said, I feel like no matter what, I'll get in trouble for how I'm thinking the words for this. But it was... I'm so hesitant to say this because I want to say the right type of feminism, or it had the right type of feminist thing, that it wasn't an overt, like, you're catcalling me so I'm going to put you through a wall.
Yeah.
It was here is a strong, capable female character who we are shooting and filming as a strong, capable female character, the same way they did it with Etta Candy, the fact that she cracks jokes, but she was still a completely capable and explicitly trusted by Steve Trevor character. It wasn't she's my secretary, she's a women don't really do this. Like, he has trouble trying to explain why it's not women out there fighting the war, but doesn't ever have the issue of you can't go because you're a woman. He never has that idea. Even when it's the room full of men, they're like, why did you allow a woman in here? Like, he never sort of brings that up. And so to me, as far as a movie that, upholds feminist ideas, I think it was great that it was done, that she was shot and portrayed exactly the same way a male character would be. And I think that's the most important part of this movie, is that it's not a even Ghost in the Shell, which I haven't seen yet, but
Me neither.
But from the trailers, it's again, we're putting somebody in a skin tight costume and it's going to be shot maybe to accentuate the fact that they're in a skin tight costume and that sort of thing. Or Aeon Flux, whatever. But your female-led movies where they always try and do something to sexualize the character or to focus on it that they didn't at all here. And that, I thought, was perfect and exactly what we need from a Wonder Woman movie.
Well, here's what I think you're trying to say. It's
yes, please, the short version.
It's a subtle feminism.
Yes.
Because she isn't treated as a woman superhero.
Right.
She's treated as a superhero, which is how she should be treated.
Who happens to be a woman during the World War I time. Yes. That is a much simpler and better put way of doing it. Yeah, because I don't want to claim that it would have been better or worse if it had been her directly taking on chauvinism. But I feel that it was very important, especially for young people and impressionable people, that we're not even making the point of that she is fighting back against that thing, as she just is, and that I felt was really good. So final thoughts on Wonder Woman after our discussion. Is there anything else that sort of came out that you really want to point out or highlight, or something that was sort of your favorite part about this movie?
Again, I'm glad she kind of at least brought up that love is one of the founding principles of Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I wish there had been more diplomacy.
Yeah.
But again, you need those punchy action sequences in a big budget Hollywood superhero film.
Right. And the fact that just because it's a female-led superhero movie doesn't mean that we need to
talk about all of our problems.
Right. Keep them from having that. Yes.
Throw a punch.
Right.
She has a mean right hook. And I'll end it there.
Yeah. I wish that they would have cut down on some of the fight stuff. I loved the scene, absolutely loved the scene where she was just marching across the field.
Oh, No Man's Land?
I loved that part.
That was great.
Because that was everything I kind of like from my Wonder Woman characters. Going from, you should be very proud of ice cream and ooh babies, to, why are women dressed like this, to here I am on the field, sword and shield in hand, marching against machine gun fire and inspiring all of these other men to get out of the trenches and run. I absolutely loved that. Not so much when she got into sort of the other fight scenes immediately afterwards, and then we kind of had sort of two boss fights, like the boss fight, but not really the boss fight. And then, but I think it hit all the marks. Some I would have liked to have been hit maybe stronger, maybe in a different order. But in general, I thought this was a really successful movie.
Yeah.
I think you made some really good points and some things that maybe I didn't consider right away when watching it. But go see this movie.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I'm seeing Oscar worthiness in it.
Me neither. But to go back to something you brought up about, you didn't want that on the nose feminism in your movies.
Well,
here's an example.
Yeah.
When she was marching across the field, and Steve Trevor says, "No, you can't. That's no man's land. We move an inch a year if we're lucky."
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't have her say, "No man's land. I am no man."
Yeah. Okay.
I am so glad, because they had those moments in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And you could hear the eyes rolling in the audience. You could just hear. I was like, "What's that sound?" That's an entire theater rolling their eyes at once. Never heard that.
I'll totally give that to you. Yes, absolutely. It very much felt that way. Yeah, because I don't want to say that I don't want overt feminism in my movies. I have absolutely no problem with that. And I think there are ways they could have done it in the lighter scenes when they were doing it. I just don't want that to be...
You want it to feel organic to the story.
And I like I said, for them shooting Wonder Woman just as the hero character, not as the female hero character, that's the sort of stuff I want. Because this very much also had some of the Jesus imagery of her floating down from the sky and that sort of thing. But there were certainly shots in there that I would love to have as a poster on the wall or as my desktop background on my computer, because it was really pretty when they did. But yeah, it was just, I could do with some different, maybe back off a little bit and show us the action, show us what she's really capable of, because she trained with Israeli soldiers.
Yeah.
But without some of the CG, pull it back, because I feel the physical stuff they did was really well done. but I don't want to reiterate myself too much. I liked this movie.
Me too.
I don't see it necessarily going out and winning Oscars, but I thought it was well acted, it was well shot, it was well cut for the most part, and I'm excited to see a sequel. Now, there was no... We'll say this now that you've gone through the whole thing. I suppose we should have said this before spoilers. Obviously, there was no after-credit sequence. I still encourage sitting through the credits anyway because I'm a film kid and you're supposed to do it because it's respectful to everyone who worked on it. And you get to listen to the score.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I liked it as much as you did because I know the chord progression they used. And this is totally a side note just for anybody listening who actually knows me. The chord progression they used not for the main Wonder Woman like metal music theme is the same one I use for the We Are Brob, my musical duo I do with my buddy Bob.
Yeah.
It's the same chord progression. You see it in movies all the time. It's a G, D, E minor, C, very kind of... so when I noticed that, it pulled it away. But when the music swells, it, you can bring a tear to your... They have very powerful moments when they do that.
Yeah. To
make her seem like an inspiring... This is what the Superman movie should have been. Wonder Woman is the inspiration we were missing from Man of Steel and Batman, especially Batman v Superman. And I don't think I can give it higher praise than that.
Yeah.
It's when we talk about her being some of the best, if not the best part of Batman v Superman, this movie fills that gap. It has character development, it has inspirational scenery and inspirational music and inspirational moments while still allowing itself to be a darker film in places. And I can only hope that DC learns from this.
Yep. Good point.
Thank you. So that is it for this week. For our poll list next week, I'll just say go out there and see. I know there were some new trailers that dropped while we were away the last couple of weeks. I think we have some more stuff on like Gifted, the X-Men show that's coming. There was another Spider-Man trailer that came out. So just, keep your ear to the ground there. Go on YouTube and just look up your most recent comic book trailers. Because next week, hopefully we'll have Liam back and we will dig back into the latest news and reviews. There's a lot of stuff going on, not the least of which has to do with Zack Snyder and Justice League and Joss Whedon stepping in, which we won't deal with here. We'll talk about that next week. So thank you, Ray, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Are you on...
I'm on Facebook. Go ahead and shoot me a friend request. I'll probably accept.
And I can throw a link up there as well so you get the right... I don't know if there's multiple Ray Widstrands, but if there are, you'd probably be the guy that pops up first, I would think.
Yeah.
But I will throw a link in the show notes if you want to find Ray. For me, you can find us on Twitter at ComicBoxCast. You can email us at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you want to tell us what you think about the Wonder Woman movie, about what we think, tell us what you think about what we think. That made sense, right?
Yeah.
About the Wonder Woman movie. We have longer, more in-depth conversations on our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/geektogeekcast. So this podcast will be on there, and in that thread, spoilers are totally open. You are welcome to go and post whatever thoughts you had about the movie. I look forward to hearing what you guys think. I hope if you haven't seen it and you just listened to all the spoilers that we didn't ruin it too much for you, and I hope you go and see the movie because this is definitely one I feel to see in the theater.
Yeah.
I feel to get that music and the rumbling of the bombs and stuff was really nice to have in the theater for this one. And that is it. Don't forget to listen to all the other shows on the Geek to Geek Podcast Network. You can head to geektogeekcast.net, or is it .com now? Beach might have updated the site. I don't know. Find us. Listen to the other shows. Star ratings and reviews. Thanks, everybody. Ray, thank you once again.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. See you guys next week with a Kick It, Ray. Ba-da-bow. I'm sorry, you pointed. Were you...
That was your cue.
Oh. Ba-da-da-da. Dum, bum, bum. Dum, 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 dum.
All right. I don't know how you end these.
With doing that. Yeah.
All right. Sayonara.